Hi everyone, I'm back with my latest Bentley Little review. Apologies in advance for my voice. I've been really under the weather for the last few days, but I want to get this out. This video might be a bit shorter than usual because of some, issues with my throat, but it'll also be shorter than usual, I think, because there's not a great deal to say about this book. I read it a couple of weeks back. I've been wanting to do this review for a while, but just haven't had any time. This was a first-time read for me. It's The Haunted from 2012. You couldn't really come up with a more generic title for a ghost story than The Haunted. But it fits because this is, for the most part, a very generic story with suitably generic cover art there. I like the cover art, but again, it is very, very cliched. Nothing special about it. But yeah, so a family of middle-aged man and woman and their two children, aged, I think the boy was about 12 and the girl was 14. They move into a new house and instantly spooky things start to happen. And most of these spooky things are culled straight from the haunted house playbook. There's something creepy in the basement, which they're all spooked by. The teenage girl invites over some friends of hers for, what do they call it, a sleepover. And one of the girls brings a Ouija board with her, because that's what teenage girls do in horror. And they have this like seance thing. Now, admittedly, that was a very creepy scene, but it's still an example of how this is almost like a box-ticking exercise, this book, when it comes to how to write a haunted house story. Let me start by, I want to do the characters first and move on to the story in more detail. So the central character, as almost is always the case in Bentley Little's books, the central character is Bentley Little himself. It's at the time of writing, it's a 45-year-old guy with eclectic music tastes, and we hear about the music tastes all the time. We get all the usual lamentations over what he thinks of as the declining appreciation of music in the youth of today. We get another Bentley Littleism. We get these really awkwardly shoehorned liberal/libertarian political slants, political takes. This time we got treated to his thoughts on the pensions crisis of the last decade. And again, like I don't mind it so much. I happen to agree with Bentley Little's politics, so it doesn't bother me. It would bug me if I were conservative, if I were right-wing, because it's really kind of shallow how he goes about it. There's a character in this who exists only to spew out these like ridiculous redneck takes on various issues, and so Bentley Little can then come along with his main character, i.e. him, and knock down the strawmen. You get used to it after a while with him. I love Bentley Little when he's telling stories. I'm not too keen on him when he's pontificating on various political things, but all right, it's his book. He can do what he likes with it. But yeah, so the characters, and then we've got the two teenage kids who are, again, quite typical of Bentley Little's siblings dynamic. They bicker a lot in the beginning, but then stressful events bring out their love for one another. It's nice. I mean, his families are always quite nice to spend time with. Right, so much for the characters. The story. Like I said, the first half of this book, very, very generic. It's your usual hauntings that go on in 1,000 films you've seen and 1,000 books you've read. I guess one of the main complaints of this is a complaint that exists for most Bentley Little novels, that people just don't react realistically to very odd things. By realistically, in this case, I mean getting the hell out of the house. Because right from the beginning, the young boy, 12-year-old boy, he's being affected by the house in various weird ways. One of the ways he's being affected is he starts to eat dirt. He goes into the garden, sticks his head down a hole in the yard, and just starts munching down the dirt, the earth. And when his father sees this, I'm going to just use this one example to cover all of them. It'll do. So, his dad's in the kitchen and he sees his 12-year-old boy with his head buried in the ground, chewing through the dirt. And he comes running out and he says, no, where my finger is, there was a ring of dirt around his mouth. What are you doing? Julian demanded. Nothing, James said, getting to his feet. But there was a guilty expression on his face, and Julian could see confusion mixed in with the guilt, confusion, and fear. I just realized that's an odd line, isn't it? Julian could see confusion mixed in with the guilt, confusion, and fear. Anyway, what's going on here? He asked, less harshly this time. I don't know, Dad, James said, and started to cry. Julian could not remember the last time his son had burst into tears like this. Although his initial reaction to the fact that the boy was apparently eating dirt had been out of anger, the anger shifted to concern. Julian walked over, looked into the hole, saw nothing unusual. He put his hands on James's shoulders. "Why were you eating dirt?" "I don't know." James was still crying. "Well, don't do it again. You know, don't do it again. You've just caught your 12-year-old kid with his head buried in the mud, eating it up, and you just told him not to do it again." Now that's, again, just one example. There's many more examples where really profoundly weird stuff goes on, but they just kind of brush it off. It's a littleism. It's a Bentley littleism that exists in all of his books, and if you're a fan of his, you accept it. So the plot and the ending of this book is a problem for some people. A lot of people dislike the ending. Why do they dislike it? They find it to be a bit anticlimactic and unexplained. There are quite a lot of loose ends in this book. We get some flashback scenes that kind of emphasize the evil of this site where the house is located, but none of these flashbacks explain any of it. They just give events from history dating back centuries which show that, you know, this place is just evil. But that's it. They don't ever explain why it's evil, why that place, or why it's culminating now. And given how Bentley Little has given us centuries of history of this site and how, you know, profoundly awful it is and malevolent it is, it turns out that besting it is very simple. And lots of kind of questions are left at the end, like, if it was this simple along, why had no one else thought to do it? Oh yeah, that's another Bentley littleism, which is a criticism of this book. Characters have revelations, and just they always turn out to be true. He'll often say something like, all of a sudden, he understood exactly what to do. He didn't know how he understood, but he just knew. You know, it's just lots of convenient little revelations that go on, which gloss over potential plot holes. So yeah, I mean, defeating this entity turned out to be pretty damn simple and effortless. So a lot of people are let down by that. I wasn't let down by it, and I'll explain why. It's connected with what I said at the start about how I like Bentley Little when he sticks to his box of tricks. Bentley Little doing spectacular endings very rarely ends well. When he tries to be really what he thinks of imaginative and creative and original, it's just a massive mess, more often than not. Whereas when he keeps it simple and subdued, he's a lot better at that. By the way, this was, by his standards, this book is very restrained. There's far less of the absolutely batshit wildness going on. There's far less violence and crazy stuff going on. It feels like a kind of a ghost story, really. You know, it's less extreme than a lot of his other stuff. And again, when he reins it in, when he keeps it simple, I like his work so much more. So I liked this book. And one other thing about this novel, it actually, at the end, moved me a little bit. It's sad. It's very bleak ending. It's a bleak book overall, this. It's quite grim and miserable and depressing. But if I'd read this book 10 years ago, it wouldn't have touched me. I may have even rolled my eyes at the ending. But the older I get, and having become a father and a husband, I don't know, this kind of thing gets to me now. It touches me deeply. And I actually found myself very touched by the ending of this book and quite moved by it. So, and that's the first time Bentley Little has ever done that he's ever moved me in some level. So well done to him for that. So on the whole, I liked this book, even though I do accept a lot of the criticisms that I've read other people make of it. It's not the most original thing in the world, but I didn't mind it. So I'm giving it a recommendation. But let me qualify that by saying my favorite subgenre of horror is ghost stories and haunted house stories. So the bar to satisfy me is really quite low. I love almost every ghost and haunted house book that I've read. So if you're not into them, you might not like it as much as I did. Right, anyway, that's going to do it. So thanks very much for watching this, guys, if you did watch it. And I will be back soon with another book review. Until then, take care of yourselves, and bye for now.